Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, I told you about a friend of mine who runs an MSP in the UK and how I got into his system. And today, I'm going to show you how I did that. But before I do that, I want to show you and I want to talk to you about how you can sell cybersecurity using a live hack. During today's session, we're going to do a few things. I'm going to demonstrate how I got onto that MSP's machine. We're also going to show you these rubber duckies, and we'll go into more detail about those in a moment. The most likely way you will go out of business today, the most likely way one of your clients will go out of business, is not a strike, is not a fire in their building, is not even COVID-19. It's a cyber breach. The amount of companies I have seen completely fail, completely disappear overnight because somebody got on their server, they encrypted their files, they stole their data, they leaked their customer data to the web. And it's happening over and over again. And it's not just big companies, it's small companies, it's managed service providers, it's dental offices, it's airlines. All of these companies are being attacked over and over again. And for the first time ever, the biggest risk to any business is a cyber breach. Remember the good old days when this is what your stack looked like. You had a firewall, you had an antivirus, you may have had some patching software, and you had a backup. And I say your stack and not your security stack because backup should not be considered part of your security. It should be considered as part of your basic IT function, but not your security. If you're restoring from a backup because of a cyber breach, your security has failed you, have no doubt about it. I don't remember if you remember back in 2001, the Lovebug virus. I remember I was working for a big multinational company and the Lovebug virus came out. And it was the most notorious virus of all time. It spread to about 30% of the world's computers. It infected banks, it infected businesses, home users, and it spread essentially when you open this email attachment, it would get all your contact list and it would email itself to all of your contacts. And it was very, very effective at spreading. And of course, security was nowhere near as good back then. But it was very effective and it bypassed a lot of security. But here's the thing about this virus. It said, I love you. That was the extent of the damage. It told you and it told all of your friends that you love them. And yes, that's kind of a little bit embarrassing if you send an email to someone, like your coworker telling him you love him, but it really isn't the end of the world. And it stung a little bit, but getting a virus really wasn't that bad. And when your customers got these viruses, when I was in an enterprise, when the users got these viruses and we fixed them as IT professionals, we went in, we were the heroes. I remember in the UK, we have this chocolate called Quality Street, and they do these commercials with this thank you very much song. And the idea is you give someone a box of this chocolates to say thank you for doing something for me. So you give them to the crossing lady at the school, you give them to your teacher, and things like that. And I remember there was a lady in the company I was working for, she got malware on her machine. She got some pictures of men's penises offering her a penis enlargement. She got very, very upset, and I cleaned it. It was my job to clean it. And then she bought me a box of chocolates to say thank you. I was the hero because I removed the malware from her computer. That's what it used to be like in the good old days. And then these attacks, they got worse. And viruses stopped showing you pictures of penises. They stopped sending spam from your account. They stopped telling you, I love you. Suddenly, they started eating your bank details, stealing your money, encrypting your files, taking you out of business. And the world just got a lot scarier. Viruses, malware, and all of these cyber threats just got a lot more real and a lot more scary. In 2016, I think, NATO declared cyberspace a war zone. They classified it in the same category that they would classify Iraq or Afghanistan during the post 9/11 war. And that's how bad cyberspace has gotten. We're not just talking about some geeky school kid now writing a virus that says, I love you. We're talking about nation states, organized gangs committing crimes, creating attacks on businesses. Anyone here ever dealt with Emotet? If you've ever dealt with Emotet, just throw it in the chat there and let me know. I mean, if you've ever dealt with this virus, it's one of those really, really nasty viruses to get rid of. What it does is it changes its hash, it recompiles itself, it adds comments in, every time it spreads. And it spreads throughout your network using various different mechanisms. It'll spread through Active Directory, it'll spread through RPC ports, and it will keep infecting different machines on your network. It will hide itself as Windows files. And it's really, really nasty to get rid of. It kind of reminds me of this scene at the end of this movie, The Terminator, where Kyle Reese is in this factory and he takes a stick of dynamite and he shoves it into the Terminator's stomach and he blows this Terminator to pieces. And he just gets back up and keeps coming. And that's kind of Emotet. That's what it's like trying to get rid of it. I was working with an MSP and they'd spent 2 weeks trying to get rid of it on this client's network and it still hadn't gone. He deployed ThreatLocker on there and we could literally see it moving from computer to computer, changing its hash, replacing Windows files, and it was really difficult to get rid of. And here's the thing about it. It was not only difficult to get rid of, this MSP was exhausted. The customer was mad at him. It was stealing financial details. It was stealing bank credentials. It's harvest data that these attackers are using to take real money off you and to shut down your business. Viruses, malware, cyber attacks don't just sting anymore. They're not nice anymore. They're not just a way of you getting more money. They encrypt files, they steal data, they harvest credentials, and it never ends. It just keeps getting harder to defend against them and harder to stop them. And the impact of them is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the harder it is to get rid of this malware, the harder it is to defend against malware today, the harder it is to defend against cyber attacks, the more your customers hate you, the more you get the blame. It's amazing. If you go in and you help your client and you remove their malware and it takes you half an hour, you get a box of chocolates, or you did back in 2001. If you're spending 2 weeks, they're mad at you. Why isn't this done? This is going on too long now. I'm fed up. It's like it's your fault that someone's attacking their business. And the thing is, these attackers, they're tactically planning their attacks ahead of time. Before they even launch their attack, they find out everything they can about you. I mean, and it doesn't matter if you're a small business with 3 employees or you're a big Garmin where they're going to go after you for 10 minutes. Even small businesses, they can get big checks, 6-figure checks from, 6-figure Bitcoin from, should I say, to get their data back. And what they'll do is they'll find out as a small company who you do business with, who your partners are, who your MSP is, where your backups are stored, what service providers you use, all of this data before they launch their attack. And what they'll do is they'll do things like go into your backup and they'll change it to backup one file or a handful of files instead of your full backup. And they'll let that run for 30 days because they know your retention period is 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, you as the MSP, you're getting your backup reports going, oh, I feel really good. I love Veeam. Isn't it great? I love Acronis. And seeing your green checkboxes all the way down, finished in 12 seconds. It's such a fast backup system, isn't it? What you don't realize is it's backing up one file. And then when they're ready, and only when they're ready, checkmate. Then they come after you. Then they attack your files. They encrypt your files. You've lost your backup. You've lost your nearline. They've got all of the data, and they're attacking you, and they've taken over your business. And the thing is they win big. $8.5 billion was the cost of ransomware last year. I want to put that into perspective. $8 billion was the entire endpoint security market. I think I may just go home and start sending out ransomware. I'd do better off. The attackers, who essentially can be anywhere in the world, are making more money than we are defending it. These guys, I mean, $10 million Garmin paid to get their data back. 3 cities in Florida last year collectively paid over $2 million to turn the water back on, or at least the billing for the water. I mean, let's just think about that for a moment. Imagine I said to you on September 12, 2001, Florida cities are going to pay organizations millions of dollars to get their data back in 2020 or 2019. Everyone would have said I'm raving mad. They'd say no one's going to pay a terrorist organization. And that's what these are, essentially. I mean, they're not taking that $2 million and building orphanages. They're terrorist organizations. They're organized crime. They work in human trafficking. And 3 Florida cities, and lots of cities all over the US, but just as that use case, 3 Florida cities last year paid over $2 million in ransoms to get their data back in Bitcoin. Just think about that. Just think about someone paying money to terrorist organizations who hijack their systems, a government agency paying money, and not small amounts of money. And the thing is once they capitalize on it, once they get into your system, once they encrypt your files, they're capitalizing on your investment. They're actually winning from this. They're getting this, and they're using it over and over again. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie before. The guy breaks out of prison, and the way he breaks out of prison is he builds the warden's trust. He does his taxes, and when he's ready, he breaks out of prison. And at the end of the movie, he goes and steals $3 million from the warden's bank account because he's collected all of the warden's details. He knows everything about him, his social security number, who he banks with. And that's what these attackers are doing. If you ever hear the saying, if you break a mirror, you get 7 years bad luck. Well, if you get ransomware, you get 7 years bad luck. How often do you hear a customer get ransomware once? Not very often. Normally it happens multiple times. And there's a few reasons it happens multiple times. One is because the customer's probably stupid and they've got users who keep clicking on things they shouldn't be. But it's also because once the attacker got in, he didn't just encrypt the files. They took the email files. They took access to your email. They took the accounting system. They took who you do business with. And all of this data was collected and essentially is then either sold to other hacking groups, other attackers on the dark web, or used again to launch an attack. Because if you know something about somebody, if you know who you do business with, if I know your customer, you send your customer a $600 invoice every month, it's easier for me as an attacker to say, I'm going to spoof your email address and tell them to put it into a different bank account. Because I already know that relationships exist here. How many of you have your tax returns in your email? And if you think about it, if someone gets that tax return, that's a lot of data they can get on you. So when these guys are coming in and they're encrypting your files, and if you are lucky enough to have a good backup and you are able to restore from that backup, and you go home at night and you think, I'm smug, don't be so smug, because the chances are they didn't leave you unscarred. They took a lot of things from you, they took a lot of things from your client, and they're going to use that in the future. Anything that they collect, it might seem so insignificant. Airline bookings, birthdays, social security numbers, invoice numbers, amounts, password, TV subscriptions, all of these little pieces of information allow them to build future attacks against your company, your clients. And the thing is, all of this malware is getting harder to detect. Who remembers back in the 90s? I don't know how many of you guys had antivirus. Back in the 90s, I went out, I got my first PC, and it was Windows 95. And I bought Norton antivirus. I was really, really feeling smug about myself. I went down to PC World. I bought Norton. It came on some floppy disks. I came back. I put it into my machine. It was like, and it went through all these disks, and it installed Norton antivirus. It's like, great, I can't get a computer virus now because I've got an antivirus. I didn't have an internet connection, but hey, I couldn't get a virus because I had an antivirus installed. And the logic in that was obviously insane, because the way I was going to get a virus is through my email, which I didn't have because we couldn't afford an internet connection because it was like £20 a month or something back then. But I had an antivirus. The thing is throughout the 2 decades, antiviruses have improved and they keep improving. And most companies have changed their antiviruses at least 3 times in the last decade. And the reason they changed their antivirus is because the previous antivirus failed them. It didn't work. It didn't detect their virus, so they go off and buy a better antivirus. But here's the problem. Whether it's antivirus, next-gen antivirus, threat hunting, SOC, EDR, while these are great technologies and they're important technologies, you can't detect every threat. And buying a new antivirus, swapping out your antivirus, and hoping it's going to detect the latest malware is kind of like changing your wife and hoping life's going to get better. Doesn't matter how many times you change your wife, she still wants you to pick up the clothes from the floor in the morning. She still wants you to shut the toilet seat lid. You have to think about security in a different way than I'm going to keep adding a new detection agent when my last detection failed me. And even if we did have the perfect antivirus and it was able to detect every piece of malware that exists, attackers are using legitimate tools and weaponizing legitimate tools against you and against your clients. We had an MSP sign up a few months ago, and a client of his called in one day and they said to him, why are you looking at my passwords? So this MSP gets this call from the client. Imagine this, you're standing there and you get a call from your client and she's yelling at you for looking at her passwords. What do you mean? I don't look at your passwords. I know you're stealing my bank passwords. You don't need to know my passwords. Why are you looking at my passwords? And this MSP is rattling his head, what's she talking about? I know her computer password because she's told me it. I don't know what's wrong with this woman. Is she on drugs? And then he realizes, when she says, you're on my machine and you're looking at my password. She said, what do you mean I'm on your machine? And he starts thinking, if someone got into my RMM, nobody got into his RMM. He's got dual factor authentication on his RMM. It's got a good password. But what had happened was the customer had found out who the MSP was because the MSP had a testimony on his website, which is a great thing to have. I mean, you've got to grow your business, and it's a very powerful way to grow your business. But the customer knew who the MSP was. The attacker knew who the MSP was. They emailed the customer from the MSP by spoofing the MSP's email address or a very similar address saying, our RMM tool is down. Can you click on this TeamViewer link? The user thought nothing of it, clicked on the TeamViewer link, and the attacker started looking at the saved password history in Chrome. Now, thankfully, the MSP kicked them off. They changed all the passwords, and there was no loss. And they're now using ThreatLocker. But these guys, these attackers, are using legitimate tools like TeamViewer, like PowerShell, like Register, like RunDLL to either encrypt your file, steal your data, gain access to your system. And they're not detected by any antivirus or anti-malware because they're not malware. Somehow, with all of this stuff going on, all of this bad shit happening, you guys have become the bad guys. And I don't know if you remember this movie, and in this movie, the aliens come in, they invade the Earth, and they blow up all the cities, and they try and fire missiles at them, and it does nothing. They can't get through their defenses. And the Secretary of Defense comes in and says, I've got an idea. Why don't we nuke them? Which is a really reasonable idea if you think about it. We can't get through their shields. The biggest bomb we've got is a nuke. All of our cities are already gone. Let's nuke them. But he's the bad guy. The president gets mad with him. Everyone gets mad with him, saying we can't nuke them. And I feel like this is you guys. This is the MSPs right now, because you're going into your client saying we need more security, and somehow you are the bad guys in the story. You're the guy that's coming in telling them to nuke the bad guys, and your customers are mad at you. So how can we defend against all these threats? How can we defend against this ever-changing malware, these advanced threats, these more aggressive threats that are putting us out of business? And how can we, or how can you, become the good guys or good girls? How can we change that dynamic? Well, first of all, we need to stop chasing the threat. My background's in enterprise, and this is a way that a lot of enterprise defends, is you don't look at threats and try and chase them. You have to stop that mentality that my antivirus failed to detect the threat, so I'm going to add a new layer of detection. My antivirus failed, so I'm going to add a new antivirus. That's not the mentality that's going to serve you well. It might make you sleep at night for a few more weeks or a few more months until something else goes wrong, but ultimately, chasing the threat is going to fail you eventually. Build more effective security solutions. So step back, look at your solution, and look at how it's balanced and what we can do. And if you look at my PowerPoint presentation here, if you look at my slide, you'll see here there's 3 parts to any security. There's the human part. So if we take an example, if a user gets an email and it's got a piece of malware in it, there's 3 ways we can stop that malware. One is the human cannot open it, and that's at the bottom. And we can train users to not open things, to not do things, to not click on TeamViewer links, but that's just one part of security. The other part is we can use detection, and that's what most of us do at the endpoint now. Our antivirus can hopefully detect it and stop that piece of malware when the user doesn't open it. And then the third part is the controls. I'm going to jump more into that in detail, but I want to talk about when security really started. If you remember back in the 80s and 90s, when we started securing our networks. And at the very beginning, there were servers, and there was the internet, and there was lines, and the lines were really slow, and there was no bad guys, or at least nobody thought there was bad guys. And we had all these ports open on these servers, and everything was allowed by default. Open Relay on mail servers, and anyone could connect to anything. And then we said, oh, these bad guys keep connecting to our servers. We want to shut down ports that aren't needed. Now, we didn't go off there and say, let's add a layer of bad guy detection. We didn't say, let's add intrusion detection to see if we can detect if someone's bad. What we said is, let's add a control in place. Let's add a firewall, and let's block all ports that are not needed. If port 25 is needed, we'll open it. If it's not needed, we'll close it. If port 80 is needed, we'll open it. If it's not needed, we'll close it. And it was very, very simple and effective. And it changed the dynamic of attacks from people saying, I'm going to attack your network, to I'm going to attack your endpoints, I'm going to use malware, I'm going to get around firewalls, because it was that effective It stopped so many network attacks. Later on, we went in and added intrusion detection, IDS, IPS, to further enhance that and detect potential threats for the things that are allowed. But we started with controls. Now, if we flick this over to the endpoint, to what most of you guys might do, or some of you guys will probably do now, is a user gets that email attachment or downloads something from the web, or however that data comes in, they pick it up on a USB drive and they open that file. Again, we have the human element at the bottom of the triangle here. You can see that. We say, can we train the user not to do stupid things? But then the other part of it is we say, OK, we've got the detection. And look at all the levels of types of detection people are using. They're using threat hunting, they're using antivirus, they're using EDR, they're using MDR, and they keep adding more of that detection in there. And they say, OK, you need to add threat hunting now. And it's not that it's bad to add threat hunting, because it's very, very good. But we're adding all of this detection into our endpoint. But the bottom line is you have no control if your antivirus can detect that piece of malware. You can't choose that. You can't decide, oh, is Symantec, is McAfee, is Webroot going to detect this piece of malware, or SentinelOne, whatever it may be. You don't have control over that. That's in their control, and they're working very, very hard, and these companies are doing great jobs at looking for this stuff, but they're not always going to detect everything. You don't control if your threat hunting will pick up a foothold or a breach that's happened because they opened it before that breach does damage. Again, great technologies to use, but you don't control it. What you can do, what you do have control over, is what users can run. If you implement technologies like application whitelisting, and just to define what that means exactly, when that user opens that email attachment or downloads something from the web, if that program, if that batch file, if that script file isn't on an allow list, whether it comes from a macro in a Word document, downloads it and tries to run it, or whether a user downloads it, tries to run it, or opens it from a USB drive, if it's not on the whitelist, it can't run. You're now in control. Now, these kind of approaches, this default deny approach, it's been around for a long time. It's used in the Department of Defense. It's mandated in the federal government. And it's one of the most effective ways you can stop malware or good software being used against you. Because if you think about it, if that user gets that TeamViewer link, if you don't allow TeamViewer in your organization, it can't run. If you don't allow that piece of malware to run, which you shouldn't do, or ransomware, it can't run. So now you're changing the dynamic. When the user opens that email attachment, step one, the user's trained. They fail the training because people do that. Step two is it on the whitelist? No, it's blocked. You're now guaranteeing, or as close to guaranteeing as you can ever get in security, that that file is not going to run. And then the third layer of defense is the detection. So that's when you accidentally permit something, it's going to be looked at by the antivirus. The other thing we can do is we can ring fence applications. So when an application is allowed to run, we can define what it can do. So if you think about Microsoft Office, or it's allowed to run, it's on your whitelist. So is PowerShell, it's allowed to run, it's on your whitelist. It doesn't really mean we want Microsoft Office to talk to PowerShell. It doesn't mean we want PowerShell to have untethered access to all your files. And there's an important point, actually. Every time you run an application on your computer, every time you open a program, whether that program is Angry Birds, Microsoft Office, Google Chrome, that program has access to everything that you have access to. You don't have to be a local admin to stop a program encrypting your files on a network share or copying your data. And we're going to show that on a rubber ducky here today. So if you can ring fence applications to stop them being used against you, that's going to be very, very effective. Now the problem is, great, you step back, you build a proper security stack, you stop relying on chasing the threat, you build in controls, you build in permissions, you build in dual factor authentication, and you go to your client and they yell at you and they say you want more, and they get really mad and really frustrated, and their blood starts boiling, and you're the bad guy again. You're the guy trying to get the nukes used on the aliens. So somehow we have to become the good guy. We have to figure out, how do you get your client to buy more security? And one of the things you can do is you can demonstrate the real danger and the real solution. And that's where I want to talk about these rubber duckies. And this is just one way of demonstrating. And I know there's dark web searches and other things like this, but this is a pretty cool way of demonstrating. If you haven't seen one of these before, these are rubber duckies. They can come in all shapes and sizes. This one here is, you can get them from Hack5. We're giving some away. So if you sign up for a trial, you lock down 100 seats within the first 60 days on the trial. You have to install and lock down 100 seats. We're actually going to mail you one of these. And what it is, it's basically a hacking device. You plug it into a computer, and I'm going to plug it in here. and show you what happens. It pops up on the screen, and it sends keystrokes to your computer. It's not a USB storage device. It won't get blocked by any storage blocking software, including ThreatLocker. What it will do is it can send keystrokes, it can open PowerShell, it can download malware, it can run malware without any input from the user. And there's a bunch of different scripts we have. The one I have here just uses and weaponizes PowerShell to copy your files up to the internet. The next one, this one here, it literally looks exactly like an iPhone charging cable. I've put a ThreatLocker label on it because I accidentally plugged it into my machine too many times, and you cannot tell the difference. Millimeter to millimeter, it looks exactly like an iPhone charging cable. This one's even more dangerous. It's actually called an OMG cable. You can do the same thing as you can with the rubber ducky, but this one you can do remotely. So I could actually plug this in and go and launch my attack later on, whereas this one requires you to do it on stage. So I'm going to switch here, and I'm just going to plug this in. I'm going to show you what happens. What I've got here, I've got a demo machine. I've disabled ThreatLocker, and you can see here it starts typing on the screen. So it's showing you what's happening. It's launching. Now, in the background, what it's done is it's launching PowerShell, and it's actually uploading all of my documents to the internet. Now, I've tried this with various EDRs, and sometimes EDRs might block it. I haven't seen one. But in this case, it wasn't blocked by the EDR. And you can see here, if I actually go into ThreatLocker's logs here, you can see all of these files are showing as ring-fenced in our audit. Now, what that means is we block them because PowerShell doesn't need access to the data. But we didn't block them. You notice if I expand, they're in green. It shows that we turned off blocking. We would have blocked them. And you can also see that it connected to Google Server, and it uploaded those files to Google's cloud. And if we jump into Google Cloud here, we can see all of the files appeared in the cloud storage. Now, this is just one example of a rubber ducky. I could have downloaded malware. I could have. I have another one here that allows you to. It literally steals all your saved passwords from Google Chrome. But it's also a very, very powerful example and of why and how easy it is to bypass security. And if you plug this into your computer, if you plug this into your client's machine and you create a demo and you show, don't just go in and hack your client's machine, show them, I want to show you how easy it is. It makes them think. It makes them think, well, wait there, this could happen to me. What if someone came into my dental office? I'm a car dealer. What if someone came in? And I've seen multiple car dealers get hacked in the same way. Multiple hospitals get hacked. Now, it is a cool tool, and it's important to tell your clients, you don't need a rubber ducky to do this. You can use a PowerShell script. You can use that same script from a Microsoft Office macro. Or last year, there was a vulnerability in Internet Explorer that allowed you to run any PowerShell command from Internet Explorer. The same attack can be delivered on different payloads. This is very cool. And it kind of reminds me at the end of this movie, Independence Day, the cable guy, repair guy, becomes the good guy. And the Secretary of Defense, who knows what he's doing and wants to nuke the aliens, he's cast off. And the cable repair guy comes in. And somehow, he knows how to hack the alien spaceship. But he doesn't come in and say, OK, I'm going to type in a code here, and look, I've bypassed it. What he does is he puts a Coke can, or he gets one of the guys to put a Coke can on the alien spacecraft and shoot at it. And bullets bounce all around the room. And then he injects his virus and then does the same thing. This is kind of a comparison, because when you show somebody how you can do something, when you show them solutions for it, you build credibility. So just like searching someone's name on the dark web and saying, oh, your data's on the dark web, doing something like a rubber ducky trick is a great way of building credibility with your client, saying, look, you have vulnerabilities. The reality is we're in a scary world. This is how we can fix it. And I have to plug my, unplug my rubber ducky and plug my thing back in. Now, there was a case of a police department. I was doing a demo for a police department in Tennessee for one of our partners. And actually, it was for a city. But the head of cyber in the police, and yes, this is a true story, had found essentially a rubber ducky in a parking lot, and he'd brought it into the office, and he plugged it into his computer. Now, he didn't know, as far as he was concerned, I have to open something on a USB device for it to be infected. He didn't think that this could actually be a keyboard. It infected the entire city, and they got ransomed. And we were doing a demo to show the customer how this could have been stopped. This is another real-life example of how these attacks happen. Now, when you're selling security to your clients, there are a few things to remember that I've created this diagram here. The first thing is show them the problem, show them real examples of the problem, or tell them about real examples. If you can't always demonstrate things, but stories go a long way. Telling them about your other experiences, clients you onboarded that had issues before, tell them other similar companies, use cases. We work with a lot of our partners to create brochures and show them real use cases. Look, these dental offices were hacked. If you're talking to a dentist, that's really, really powerful. So show them the problem or show them an example of the problem and explain how it's working. Not really technical, but at a high level. Demonstrate solutions for your clients and implement them. And this is really important. When you sell security, don't tell your client, we've solved all your problems. Leave the door open. Promise them that you're going to keep looking after their business, you're going to keep looking at the market, and you're going to keep finding solutions to today's threats. So make sure you do leave that door open. I'm not a big fan of security stacks, but I know they're very, very popular in the industry. I've got some sample stacks here, and the idea isn't for these to be your stacks, but to show you how, if you're going to build stacks, how you do it. Never have two stacks, never have a basic and advanced. Always have three, and always have the two at the higher level closer together than the one at the lower level. So if you've got a basic stack, put the basic stuff in, and then the other two, keep them closer together, because then your customers are going to compare those two rather than comparing the first one. Now, I promised yesterday I'd tell you and show you how I managed to get onto that MSP's computer, and I want to reiterate by saying this again. Every time you run a program on your computer, every time you open a file, that application has access to everything that you have access to. If you are an IT manager and you're a domain admin, it has access to everything that you have access to on the domain. If you're a local user and you have access to finance, so does that application. I was given a challenge to get onto this MSP's computer. I wasn't going to get senior tech to run something. I wasn't going to get into his RMM. I knew he's probably going to have dual factor authentication. I didn't even try, and I knew he's probably going to have a smart password. So I had to figure out how could I get into this guy's machine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to get Michael to join me via Zoom, and I'm going to get him to play the part of the MSP in. All I'm going to do is I'm going to get him to connect to my machine as he would a normal customer's machine. I'm going to show you how I steal his credentials, how I steal his RMM credentials, and how I get him to run malware on his machine without even knowing. So if you can just give me a few moments to get Michael on.
Hello, Michael. Thank you for joining us today. I'm here at an MSP event talking to MSPs about how they need to protect their environment using other methodologies other than antivirus. And one of the things I was talking about was that MSP last week, or a few weeks ago, where I was able to get access to his machine, get his RMM password, and get him to run malware on his machine and essentially bypass his security tools. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to demonstrate to them how I did that. So what I'm going to ask you to do is fill in as the MSP, connect to my machine, and we can show them the process of how easy it was to hijack an MSP's computer from their client. So thank you for joining us, Michael.
No problem. Hi, Danny, and hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'll share out my screen now then. Just bear with me for 1 second. So you should be able to see my screen now?
Yes, I can see your screen. And what I'm going to ask you to do, Michael, is if you can connect to my machine using TeamViewer, I've sent you on the details. Guys, we're just using TeamViewer here because it's easy. There are lots of RMMs. We could have done the same thing with any remote control tool or most remote control tools. But essentially what I'm going to get Michael to do is connect to my machine as if I was a customer. And in this case, what I did was I said to the MSP, my computer's running slow. Can you have a look at it? And we're going to simulate what the MSP did. So the first thing the MSP did when they connected to my machine was actually just to check for Windows updates. So if you can do that, Michael, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm just going to come here, check for updates.
And as per usual, checking for Windows updates took a long time. So what the MSP did at this point was he minimized the session to my computer. And Michael does have ThreatLocker running on his computer, but he has put it in complete monitor only mode. What I noticed is the MSP was working in the background while he was connected to my computer. And what I noticed is he was working on Office 365 scripts. So maybe if you can simulate that, Michael, just run some Office 365 scripts on your computer.
Yeah, no problem. I have one here. Just a basic script to get shared mailboxes.
Yeah, that should work.
Perfect. I'll just copy and paste that into PowerShell. Doesn't have to be an admin, so Just paste it there.
And you'll notice here, if you look at the screen, that you can see Michael's computer has now been infected with malware. Now, this isn't real malware. It's essentially just a piece of fake malware to show that we can run code, we can gain access to the machine. And as far as what Michael was concerned, is he was just running an Office 365 script, and somehow we managed to hijack that. And I'm going to get into why in a moment. But there was a few other things this MSP did while they were connected to my machine. And one of them was logging into their RMM. And they weren't logging into the, I want to clarify here, this is Michael's computer as the MSP. They weren't logging into their RMM from my computer, they were logging in from there. So if you can maybe just open your password manager and go through the steps like you would if you were logging into an RMM, Michael.
Yep, no problem. So I'm just using KeePass here. So it's got my username, it's got my password in it. Not actually going to log into an RMM, so I'm just going to go to gmail.com. Sign in there. And then just take my password out of here as well. Now, this is not actually my password for my Gmail, so it will fail, but the process is the same.
And there was one other thing I'm going to ask you to do. Can you do me a favor? Send my Calendly link to everyone in ThreatLocker, or send it to a Slack channel in ThreatLocker if you've got,
no worries.
or any Calendly link.
I've got yours here, so I'll take this. And we have a...
And Michael, you just sent Tinder to everyone in ThreatLocker. Does Missy know, your wife know you're on Tinder? I'm sure Michael wasn't on Tinder, although we're never going to know at this point. But I do want to share a point here, is Michael's connected to my machine, and this is essentially just what the MSP did. And you would think that if you connect to somebody's machine, you can run malware on their machine. If you get into somebody's RMM, it's expected that you can run malware on the machines. But what you might not think is when you as an MSP connects to somebody else's machine, that they can essentially compromise and hijack your machine. When you connect to somebody's computer, you share something very, very important. And you can see here, we've got two screens, and we're going to, hopefully you can see my screen as well. And one of the things that happened while Michael was connected to my machine, he shared my clipboard. And yes, you can disable this, and yes, you can ring fence it with ThreatLocker, but essentially Michael's sharing my clipboard. He's using my clipboard while he's using your clipboard. What I noticed while this MSP was connected to my machine, while he was running Windows updates in the background, that he was running Office 365 scripts. And I noticed that because I could see what was in his clipboard. So what I decided to do was to replace that clipboard. And I wrote a little program here, and you can see on my screen, I replaced that clipboard with my malware script. And literally, if you think this is some massive complex code, this is all the code that was required to do this. So the first thing I did is said, okay, if you're running a PowerShell script, we're going to replace it with our PowerShell script, which is basically this script here, which downloads and runs a piece of malware on your machine. If you have any other clipboard text, we're going to steal it. So when Michael logged into his RMM, this is a fake password, we copied this RMM password into the clipboard. So I was able to extract the MSP's RMM password and 7 or 8 other passwords at the same time. And the third thing I did, just for shits and giggles and just to kind of embarrass him a little bit, was to hijack any URLs with a website that was a little bit worse than Tinder. And in this case, I did it for Michael for Tinder because it's for demo purposes. And when he replaced went to any website, when he copied any website, it would automatically replace it with that site. It's really important to know that when you're connecting to your clients, or when you're doing anything on your computer, there's always things you don't think about. There's always ways to spread malware. And Michael, I appreciate you being the guinea pig here and you simulating the role as an MSP.
No problem.
I'm going to ask you to do one more thing for me, if you don't mind, Michael. We're not going to turn on any ring fencing because the ring fencing could have stopped this as well in numerous ways. But I'm going to ask you just to turn off monitor only mode on the application whitelisting so the customers can see what would have happened if they were running ThreatLocker and that malware tried to run.
No problem.
If you do use things like application whitelisting, you're taking away a lot of that surface area of attack. So even though I was able to hijack the clipboard, I wouldn't have been able to run the malware. And then we could also ring fence the clipboard. We could ring fence access to files. We could ring fence PowerShell from going out to the internet to even download that malware. So if you try and run that Office 365 script one more time for me, Michael. You'll see here that it shows access is denied, and it should have popped up as well. Maybe you hit request before, so you can just show, or you're not running ThreatLocker's tray.
Do it.
So Michael just installed ThreatLocker very quickly on here and apparently didn't open the tray app afterwards. So if you can just run that one more time. And you'll see it says access is denied, but because the tray wasn't open. Oh, it's deciding to copy the get mailbox now, is it? Did your team viewer session end?
Nope. Nope. No. Did it? No. No, I'm still on TeamViewer.
I'm just going to run this on my side. Maybe I stopped the app from running. So if you, on my end, if you don't mind copying that one more time. And again, this is on Michael's machine who's running this, not on mine. There you go. And we see that was denied. And you'll see that ThreatLocker popped up and blocked that. And the idea is the antivirus did not know this malware. This was a custom piece of malware written by me just to give me access to his machine. The antivirus didn't detect it, but it doesn't matter because with ThreatLocker, we're going to deny by default. We're going to assume you don't need this boo.exe to run. You don't need this DLL. You don't need this script file. Therefore, we're going to block it. And you don't have to worry about it encrypting your files or copying your data or accessing your machine. We could have also stopped the clipboard hijacking with ringfencing. We could have stopped the ringfencing to stop PowerShell going out to the internet. We could have used ringfencing to stop, even if we did allow that program to run, to stop it accessing files. So all of these things you can do to harden your environment, but you should really think about security in a balanced way and not just, I'm going to get more detection, I'm going to get more detection, because ultimately at some point detection is going to let you down. If you deny by default, and if you ring fence applications that can run, you're really going to harden your environment from that. Also, if you are connected to your client's machine and you are mapping clipboards, just be really conscious about the passwords you're copying and pasting. Try and use autofill functions instead. And I always say to our guys, there's certain passwords you do not want in your password manager. Password managers are great, but you don't necessarily want your RMM passwords. You don't want your domain admin passwords. Maybe you don't want your email passwords in your password manager. So Michael, thank you for joining us. I'm going to let you duck out now, and I will talk
Thank you very much.
So you can see here how I was very easily able to trick this MSP just by him connecting to my machine. And that's no different to you connecting to one of your clients' machines and them having malware on it. It really is important as an MSP that you think about security and you don't ever go to bed at night thinking I'm secure and I'm safe, because the moment you let your guard down, the moment you feel comfortable with what you've got, that's when you're going to get caught. And there are things you can do by adding common sense security controls in place, by not just using detection, adding application whitelisting, adding zero trust, adding ring fencing, adding storage policies into your stack. You can really harden your environment. Just to summarize, denying by default stops not just known malware and unknown malware, but it also stops legitimate tools being run that aren't needed on your system. It stops shadow IT, and it puts you in control. If you use ThreatLocker, take a look at our tools, come over to our booth, talk to some of our guys, do a demo. I promise it's a 45 minutes that's definitely worth it. But if you use ThreatLocker, we make it very, very easy. We've had MSPs deploy thousands of seats at the end of a demo and lock down a week later. It really is that easy. When you do allow software to run, ring fence it. If it doesn't need access to your files, just don't give it access. It's not about, do I trust this application or not? If it's compromised like Zoom was in March, like Internet Explorer was last year, if it doesn't have access to your files, then it can't eat your data, it can't encrypt your data, it can't copy your data. And apply storage policies where you can. If applications, if QuickBooks needs access to a folder, only give QuickBooks access to that folder. With your customers, show them the risk, show them the dangers, and show them how important it is. Build trust with your customers. When you do that, your customers are going to allow you to bring new security solutions into them and trust them when you offer new solutions. I appreciate you taking the time to watch today. If you get time, drop by to our booth, speak to some of our guys, schedule a demo. Like I said, I promise it's worth it. It's 45 minutes. And if you do deploy and lock down 100 seats on a trial, you only have to try it. You don't have to buy it. Everyone who tries it buys it, though. We are sending out these rubber duckies free of charge. And we also have an MSP box drive where you can find a load of marketing information and rubber ducky scripts in the box drive that you can have pre-canned, ready to show your clients. Thank you very much.